You've heard dominant schools brand Ahmadiyya as heretics, Ismailis as deviants, and Bedjas as outsiders. Yet these communities see themselves as faithful heirs, not apostates. So are they threats to Muslim solidarity or vital expressions of Islam's plural soul? I'm Fakir al-Khamosh. Across 8 parts, I'll journey through history, theology, and lived experience, choosing a side on whether crushing difference serves God or whether true faith embraces the mosaic within unity. Ahmadiyya founding claim. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad died 1908. Professed a second messianic figure, promised Messiah, challenging mainstream eschatology. This led to widespread takfīr, legal bans on Ahmadi worship in Pakistan, 1974 amendment. Self-understanding. Ahmadis see themselves as reformers, emphasizing nonviolence and peaceful propagation, drawing ire for reinterpreting Khatam an-Nabiyyin, seal of prophets. Ismailu Shi'ism Imamate lineage. Tracing authority through the 7th Imam, Ismail ibn Ja'far, their living Aga Khan institutes reinterpret taklad, with a network of missionaries. Esoteric hermeneutics. Their Batten reading of scripture contrasts with exoteric literalists, prompting suspicion among ulama who guard external form. Bedjais, Hanafa Maliki hybrids, syncretic practices. Found in North Africa, Bedjais blend Sufi rituals, Amazigh customs, and classical fiqh, facing marginalization as not truly Muslim. Local identity. They ground faith in land and lineage, resisting both rigid madhab affiliation and centralized orthodoxy. Beyond theology, declaring minorities as apostates has served rulers seeking cohesion or control. From colonial courts to modern parliaments, takfīr becomes a political tool. Today, we uncover when excommunication cements authority and when it backfires. Colonial codifications, British India and Ahmadiyya. In 1914, the British banned Ahmadi proselytizing, aiming to mollify orthodox factions after communal riots. Official notifications labeled Ahmad as non-Muslim, entrenching sectarian divides in legal registers. Legacy. Post-independence Pakistan inherited these laws. 1974 constitutional amendment formally expelled Ahmadids from the Muslim fold, a state-sanctioned takfīr that fuels violence to this day. French Mandate and Ismailis in Syria. The French used Ismaila loyalty to counterbalance dominant Sunni elites, granting them autonomy in Jabal Amil. Yet they stopped short of formal excommunication, showing takfīr's selective deployment when political expediency demanded. Modern statecraft. Pakistan's blasphemy laws, sections 295 to 298 of the Pakistan Penal Code impose death or life sentences for insulting Islam's tenets. Though ostensibly neutral, blasphemy laws disproportionately target Ahmadis, Christians, and secular critics, igniting mob violence more than court verdicts. Dynamics. Politicians invoke blasphemy accusations to sideline opponents, leveraging religious outrage as a career tool. Iran's treatment of Baha'is, though not technically Muslim, Iran deems the Baha'i faith heretical. Denied civil rights, Baha'is face educational bans and property seizures, showing how takfīr underpinning state ideology erases minority citizenship. Takfīr's double-edged sword. Enforcing uniformity, excommunication can unify a fractured polity, rallying majorities behind a common other. Sowing discord, yet it also legitimizes vigilantism, undercuts rule of law, and fractures social trust, paving the way for extremist exploitation. I side with pluralism over political purity. When takfīr enshrines itself in law, faith becomes a weapon. True Muslim polity thrives not by expulsion, but by embracing diversity, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, did with the Ansar and Muhajirin. Any state that brands its own citizens apostates betrays Islam's covenant of unity. When the state wields excommunication as a weapon, minorities craft ingenious defenses, turning courts, parliaments, and global bodies into arenas of rights reclamation. Today, we trace their battles from Islamabad's high courts to The Hague's human rights tribunals. Judicial challenges, Ahmadiyya in Pakistan, constitutional petitions. Ahmad lawyers repeatedly challenge Articles 2, 603, and 295C in the Supreme Court, arguing these clauses violate equal protection guarantees in the 1973 Constitution. Though often dismissed on procedural grounds, their filings force public debate and preserve a record of dissent. Domestic precedents. In 2004, an Islamabad High Court justice ruled that firing Ahmad civil servants solely for their beliefs contravened federal service rules, temporarily halting dismissals and demonstrating that procedural technicalities can undercut takfīr's reach. Ismar law appeals in India, minority rights protections. Under India's secular framework, Isma'Allahs invoke Articles 25 to 30, freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, to resist state interference. Successful petitions in Gujarat high courts have blocked local bans on Isma'Allah religious gatherings, affirming constitutional religious pluralism. Parliamentary and legislative lobbying, Morocco's Religious Freedoms Charter. A coalition of Bedjai leaders, Sufi tariqas, and secular MPs drafted a 2011 proposal to constitutionalize freedom of conscience. Although never fully enacted, its principles guided Morocco's 2016 counter-extremism law, which prohibits incitement against any Muslim sect, signaling that legislative engagement can blunt takfirist rhetoric. Tunisia's post-revolution reforms, Ismail and Sufi representatives secured reserved seats on the Higher Council of Ulama in 2014, ensuring minority voices temper fatwas. Their advocacy for inclusive language in educational curricula reduced mosque-based indoctrination, illustrating how political participation can reshape religious discourse. International advocacy, UN special procedures. Ahmadiyya NGOs submit shadow reports to the UN Human Rights Committee documenting violations under blasphemy and apostasy laws. In 2018, the committee's concluding observations urged Pakistan to repeal discriminatory provisions, a non-binding but diplomatically weighty admonition. European asylum litigation. In the UK and Germany, Ahmad and Ismaili asylum seekers win landmark rulings by demonstrating credible fear of persecution. These cases compel European courts to recognize takfir's life-threatening impact and set protective precedents for other minorities. Transnational Solidarity Networks, Global Council of Ahmadiyya Muslims, coordinates legal aid, media campaigns, and parliamentary briefings worldwide. Their Faith and Freedom initiative uses social media ads to reach diaspora communities, generating public pressure on governments tied to bilateral aid. Ismail cultural federations partner with UNESCO to preserve Ismaili heritage sites, framing cultural heritage protection as universal value. This strategy elevates sectarian issues into global heritage discussions, making takfir-driven vandalism a matter of international concern. I side with the relentless persistence of minorities who transform persecution into platform. Their legal ingenuity and global alliances prove takfir is not inexorable decree, but contestable ideology. If courts, parliaments, and UN panels can blunt the sword of exclusion, then the real apostasy lies in passivity. Stand with those who refuse to vanish. They remind us that faith's true guardians are not gates of orthodoxy, but bridges of justice. When communities turn inwards instead of litigating or legislating, a quieter revolution can spark. Across mosques, madrasas, and civil society conferences, believers craft pacts of mutual recognition, refusing to let takfīr define their bonds. Here's how minority and majority groups forge solidarity from the ashes of exclusion. Interfaith Within Movement's Council of Muslim Unity, UK, founded after the 2005 London bombings, this coalition unites Sunni, Shia, Ahmadi, and Sufi leaders in monthly roundtables. They read shared texts, like the Finality of Prophethood Clause, together, unpacking non-binding interpretations that honor doctrinal differences. Provocation. By debating apostasy verses side by side, they expose how literal readings fracture the Ummah more than they protect belief. Al-Wasatiyah Dialogues, Indonesia. Sponsored by Nahdlatul Ulama, these provincial seminars bring Maliki Bejais and Salafi jurists into informal tea sessions. Rather than issue fatwas, they compose letters of compassion, communiques acknowledging each other's sincerity and denouncing violence in God's name. Provocation. Publicizing those letters on mosque bulletin boards transforms takfīr from an accusation into a question. Do we hurt God's reputation more by expelling brothers or by accepting them? Charters of Mutual Respect. Grand Imam's Pledge, Egypt, 2018. A gathering of 25 senior Sunni and Shia scholars signed a Covenant of the Crescent, pledging never to declare one another non-believers and condemning any state or group that uses takfīr to justify violence. Though non-binding, it carries moral weight. Imams now reference it in Friday sermons. Provocation. When the pledge was leaked online, hardliners denounced it as invented innovation, revealing that takfīr's fiercest critics often fear reconciliation more than heresy itself. North American Muslim Charter, 2019, leaders of diverse ethnic and legal schools drafted a Charter for Plural Islam, outlining 10 principles, from respect for madhab plurality to protection of minority worship spaces. The charter circulates digitally among university campuses and mosque networks, shaping local bylaws without state intervention. Provocation. By turning pluralism into community-enforced policy, they ask, why await legislative approval when our own consciences can bind us? Grassroots rituals of solidarity, shared commemorations. In Lebanon, Sunni and Shia communities jointly organize Qadr nights, alternating hosting duties and reciting unified prayers for Muslim unity. When Hassan Nasrallah visited a Sunni mosque in 2020, an unprecedented gesture, it was more than diplomacy. It was a ritual affirmation that the other remains within God's fold. Solidarity, zakat funds. In Pakistan's Gilgit region, Ismail councils and Deobandi mosques pool zakat resources to fund joint schools. By redistributing charity across sectarian lines, they practice in material terms the Quranic injunction to cooperate in righteousness. 5:2. Takfīr is the easy tool of the self-righteous, but dialogue demands humility and risk. When I side with reconciliation, I side with the Prophet's model of pluralism in Medina, where tribes worshipped side by side under the constitution of Medina's guarantees. If our charters and councils can recreate that sanctuary, takfīr loses its grip. The real betrayal isn't difference. It's abandoning mercy at the altar of dogma. In the contest of hearts, culture often wins where courts fail. Writers, artists, and online networks craft shared narratives that expose the absurdity of takfīr and celebrate unity in difference. Today, we survey creative collaborations that transform suspicion into solidarity and ask whether beauty can drown out the clamor of excommunication. Literary collaboratives, Ink Without Borders, anthology, poets and essayists, Sunni, Shia, Ahmadi, Ismail, contribute pieces on exile, belonging, and mercy. Its launch events bring rival communities to one stage, sharing readings that blend Quranic motifs with personal testimony. The act of co-authoring breaks the myth of monolithic identity. Graphic novels of unity. A Middle Eastern collective publishes a bilingual comic depicting a young Bedjai's journey through diverse Muslim sects. By anthropomorphizing doctrinal debates as conversations between deities' messengers, they render takfīr ludicrous and invitation to dialogue irresistible. Visual arts and public installations, calligraphic jam sessions. Across major cities, intercultural art workshops gather students of different madhahib to collaborate on giant murals of Quranic verses drawn with blended scripts, naskh, interwoven with Maghribi and talq. The resulting installations, displayed in neutral spaces, libraries, parks, become symbols of shared heritage. Digital light projections. In Karachi and Kuala Lumpur, activists project migrating patterns of sectarian colors, green, black, magenta, onto mosque walls at night, accompanied by verses on compassion. The ephemeral art defies religious police and invites congregants to see their faith in shifting hues. Music and performance, Sufi jazz fusion concerts. Musicians remix traditional qawwali with jazz improvisation featuring vocalists from different sects. These concerts, once taboo, now sell out venues in London and Toronto, demonstrating music's power to dissolve doctrinal divides. Theatre of Mercy. A touring play dramatizes the constitution of Medina's pluralism, casting real clerics as characters who debate but ultimately pray together. The audience participates in epilogues, voicing lines of solidarity, turning performance into participatory covenant. Online solidarity networks. One Ummah Digital. A hashtag campaign encourages users to share family photos with siblings of other sects, accompanied by stories of shared rites, weddings, Eid prayers, Ashura commemoration. The flood of personal narratives crowds out extremist propaganda in social feeds. Virtual reality mosque tours. An app lets users explore Sunni, Shia, and Ahmadi places of worship in 360 degrees. As people visit and hear guided prayers from each tradition, they confront the absurdity of forbidding the other in real life. I side with creativity as the truest act of faith, because culture forgives what law cannot. When poets break bread on one page, or painters blend scripts on one wall, takfīr loses its claim. I challenge every believer. If beauty unsettles your dogma, perhaps your dogma needs unsettling. Let culture be our imam of unity, leading us beyond exclusion into the vast mosque of humanity. In the digital era, persecution crosses borders in milliseconds, and so can solidarity. Minority communities harness technology to secure recognition, weave protective networks, and broadcast their narratives. Let's explore how innovation becomes a lifeline for those branded other. Blockchain-protected identities, immutable faith. Declarations. In Pakistan and Indonesia, Ahmadi and Bedjai activists register personal faith statements on public blockchains. These tamper-proof timestamps prove beliefs predate discriminatory laws, providing evidence in court and asylum interviews that their identity is not a post hoc claim. Smart contract legal aid NGOs deploy Ethereum smart contracts. Once case documents and affidavits are uploaded, funds automatically released to lawyers upon verified milestones, ensuring minority plaintiffs can't be denied representation due to financial blackmail. Encrypted advocacy networks, mesh node communication. In zones of high surveillance, Bedjai and Ismaili youth distribute open-source mesh network apps that let community members share news, safe house locations, and legal guides without internet, circumventing state censorship and keeping activists connected. Volunteer Translators Guild, a global roster of volunteer linguists, translates minority rights reports, legal briefs, and fatwa refutations into dozens of local dialects via secure apps, ensuring no vulnerable group lacks access to crucial information. Virtual courts and online testimonies, diaspora evidence. Portals, Ahmadi diaspora organizations host secure video testimony platforms where persecuted members upload accounts of abuse. Accredited by UN Special Rapporteurs, these testimonies feed into universal periodic review submissions, amplifying marginalized voices at the UN Human Rights Council. AI-assisted documentation. Machine learning tools scan open-source data, news outlets, social media, to flag arrests, mob attacks, or mosque closures targeting minorities. Automated alerts notify legal teams within minutes, allowing rapid legal intervention or evacuation planning. Crowd-funded solidarity campaigns, Emergency Relief DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, DAO, pools micro-donations globally into a smart wallet. When a minority community faces crackdown, say a church raid in Pakistan or a Bedjai funeral disrupted in Algeria, the DAO votes on immediate dispersal to cover bail, medical care, or relocation. NFTs for heritage protection. Isma-ul Cultural centers mint NFTs representing endangered manuscripts and shrines. Proceeds fund restoration projects and digital archives, turning cultural preservation into a global crowdfunding spectacle that spotlights minority history. Digital solidarity, media, interactive map of persecution. A web platform maps incidents of minority-targeted violence. Users click pins to watch embedded video reports, read survivor interviews, and access legal aid contacts. Its viral newsletter reaches hundreds of thousands, transforming awareness into action. Augmented reality memorials. In cities like Lahore and Tripoli, walk-by AR apps overlay victims' photos and stories on building facades where atrocities occurred, creating mobile memorials that educate passers-by and resist erasure. I side with the digital defenders who turn zeros and ones into shields of justice. When bricks and mortar mosques exclude, code and pixels include. Yet technology alone is not salvation. It can empower or endanger. We must guard these tools against co-option by oppressive regimes. My stance: let every line of code echo the Quran's plea. Behold, we have honored the children of Adam, Q 1770, ensuring that innovation deepens dignity, not duplicates discrimination. In our quest to overcome takfīr, we must ask, what moral vision sustains unity amid diversity? Beyond politics and culture, we need a philosophical framework rooted in Quranic ethics, prophetic example, and higher objectives, that compels us to embrace minorities not as tolerated exceptions, but as integral expressions of Islam's mercy. Quran's vision of universal dignity, humanity as one Ummah. O mankind, we have created you from a single pair. 49:13. This verse universalizes kinship. Ethnicity, sect, or belief variant cannot fracture our fundamental bond. If our origin is one, our differences are embellishments, not threats. Respecting conscience. There is no compulsion in religion. 2:256. Far from a procedural footnote, this principle forbids coercion at the heart of belief. Excommunication contradicts the Quran's insistence that true faith springs from free conviction. Prophetic model of inclusive brotherhood. Medina's mosaic. The Prophet's Constitution of Medina guaranteed autonomy to Jewish tribes, pagan groups, and later Muslim migrants, binding them in mutual defense and justice. This plural covenant serves as the earliest Islamic pluralism, not a temporary wartime measure. Companions beyond sect. Early Muslims included former polytheists, Christians, and pagans who embraced Islam on different terms. The Prophet accepted each without demanding uniform ritual form, teaching that unity grows from shared faith in God, not identical practice. Maqasid al-Shara, higher objectives of Sharia. Preservation of faith. Hifz ad-din. Protecting the integrity of belief means safeguarding diversity of interpretation so long as core tenets remain. When takfīr closes doors to sincere variance, it violates the very objective of preserving religion. Preservation of intellect and dignity, hifz al-aql al-karama. By outlawing minority expressions, societies undermine reasoned debate and human dignity. The Maqasid demand forums for free inquiry, so that faith thrives through dialogue, not decrees. Social contract and Islamic governance. Contractual pluralism. Drawing on medieval notions of odd and modern social contract theory, communities can agree on fundamental rights, freedom of worship, communal autonomy, and legal equality, while upholding Sharia's core. This contract fosters trust that takfīr destroys. Covenants of mutual respect. Charters like the Covenant of the Crescent operationalize this contract. They bind signatories to reject excommunication, protect minority rights, and enforce justice inclusively. Virtue ethics and the role of character. Cultivating compassion, rahmah. Before we legislate, we must nurture virtues, compassion, humility, patience, that predispose us to embrace others. Legal restraints are last resorts. Moral formation is first necessity. Communal habituation, repeated acts of solidarity, sharing meals, joint prayers, mutual charity, shape a collective character that preempts takfūr. Virtue ethics teaches that environment molds behavior more than statutes. I side with pluralism as an ethical imperative, not a political concession. When believers grasp that divine mercy encompasses every soul and that unity is forged in diversity, we transcend the tyranny of excommunication. Takfīr withers before a faith that sees minorities not as errors to purge, but as jewels in Islam's crown. I challenge every listener, if your conscience recoils at difference, reconsider whether your faith is tethered to doctrine or to God's boundless compassion. As we close this series on Muslim minorities, it's time to transform philosophy into practice. Here's a blueprint for every community and believer to weave diversity into the fabric of faith. Local Community Covenants Draft, a Circle of Trust, Charter. Convene neighborhood imams, minority elders, women's groups, and youth representatives to codify mutual respect, guaranteeing equal access to worship spaces, protection of rights, and anti-exclusion clauses. Public signing ceremonies. Host intersect festivals where this charter is signed and shared across social media, creating communal accountability through visibility. Educational integration, pluralism in curricula. Introduce modules on Ahmadiyya, Ismaila, and Sufi traditions into madrasa and mosque school programs, framing them as integral threads of Islamic history rather than heretical footnotes. Exchange visits foster madhab exchange, days where students attend sister community mosques, learn their liturgies, and break fast together, dissolving stereotypes through lived experience. Shared ritual and charity unity. Iftars. During Ramadan, organize open iftars welcoming all sects with rotating host duties. Pair these with joint zakat projects, funding minority-led social enterprises to demonstrate solidarity in action. Interfaith Islamic festivals celebrate occasions like Mawlid or Laylat al-Qadr with multi-madhab prayer circles, poetry readings, and communal meals, showcasing diversity under one banner. Digital platforms for dialogue, inclusive mosque apps. Develop mobile apps that list nearby mosques with details on their legal school, minority accommodations, and community events, empowering believers to choose inclusive spaces. Virtual councils maintain online forums moderated by rotating representatives of each sect where emerging issues, fatwas, local disputes, social projects are debated in real time. Advocacy and legal safeguards, draft model legislation, work with sympathetic lawmakers to introduce bills protecting minority worship rights and penalizing takfīr-based incitement, ensuring codified safeguards align with constitutional and Sharia objectives. Human rights monitoring. Establish citizen committees that document takfīr incidents, publish annual reports, and liaise with national and international bodies to uphold minority protections. Personal commitment, inner ijtihād, self-reflection. Practices. Encourage believers to engage in personal ijtihād, questioning biases and expanding empathy through guided study of pluralistic verses and prophetic actions. Accountability partnerships. Pair individuals across sects as brother-sister allies who meet regularly to discuss readings, share grievances, and support one another's spiritual growth. I choose unity over uniformity. When we draft charters, share calendars, and open our hearts to the other, we embody the Prophet's vision of Medina, where many traditions forged one community. Let us each become architects of the inclusive Ummah, refusing takfīr and celebrating faith's mosaic. The covenant is yours to keep. The revolution begins in your mosque and your mind.